choices that they make. And the reason I'm talking about it is we do have to say to people in schools, we're not being selfish. This isn't, you know, people say the economy's messed up, what are we going to do about it? We think there's an alternative on the economy, but even on the narrow focus of our pensions, it's not true that it's unaffordable. And this thing, I think this is the most damaging psychologically on our members, where they say there's a sort of apartheid in our country, private sector workers' pensions are really bad and public sector workers get fantastic pensions and we should be feeling guilty about it. Well, I think you should feel, like I do, sick when they say that. The idea that David Cameron from the Conservative Party, he was a member of the Conservative Party when the Federation of Conservative Students had t-shirts that said "Hang Nelson Mandela." Yes. The idea that he's using the word apartheid in an attempt to justify this, when the ANC fought against apartheid, they were fighting to lift people's rights up. He's fighting to reduce people's rights down. It's a completely, it's a disgraceful use of the word. The other people who use it are the Taxpayers Alliance. Now this is an organisation of the bosses who cut the private sector pensions in the first place. So they cut their pensions, then they use that as an argument to justify cutting ours. But I think the most effective argument about this public sector, private sector thing is the remit that they gave to John Hutton when they told him to do this report. Because they said to him that he had to look at the disparity between public sector workers' pensions and private sector workers' pensions. That had to be at the forefront of his review, and that he wasn't allowed to make any recommendations about the private sector pensions. So the only thing he can do is, there is a problem in our society about pensions, and it's not generally about private sector pensions. It's about the poorer workers in the private sector, because the managing directors in private sector, their pensions are all right, actually. But there have been lots of private sector workers who've had their pensions shafted. That's what our government should be looking at. But instead of telling them to look at that, he says, look at the disparity, but you can't make any recommendation about the private sector. So it's a political attack to reduce our pensions down. And we've got to be upfront about saying that, I think. So, in that situation, we should fight it. We should challenge what the government says. So these are some, I don't know whether these are strategies or